What's going on, everybody? This is 3-Point Play here. John and Pemba with James Grande. No Howard Bender. He's out at, FSGA right now, or FSTA? What we got here? It's one of those trade conferences. Fantasy football kicking into gear, but Howard's not here. It's me and James, so we're going to talk some basketball. James, how you doing?
I'm well, man. I'm very good. I'm very excited to talk basketball. I mean, obviously we're in, full force with baseball, and football is fast approaching, but I mean, this is the most talked about NBA free agency we've had ever, probably. So, I mean, I think it's, a good, perfect. I don't think there's a better time that we could be breaking down what's going on and some basketball topics for you guys.
Yeah, so for those of you tuning in, maybe you haven't caught 3-Point Play before, we take 3 topics. James and I will take one side of that topic and we'll debate it. We have 3 points. At the end, whoever makes the best argument for their case, put it out to you guys for a vote. Winner wins. James, ready to kick it off?
I am, sir. Let's get it.
All right, so obviously the NBA awards show just happened recently the other day. Big controversy for at least one person, seems like. Because Giannis Antetokounmpo won the MVP, much to the chagrin of James Harden. The question is, who deserved it? Giannis, Harden, or somebody else?
So I'm going to take the side with Giannis. And, I mean, look, we're obviously all in agreement that they both had phenomenal seasons. I mean, we saw James Harden, put the team on his back when Chris Paul was out. It was unbelievable what we saw. But when Chris Paul returned, yes, he was still great, but he also had more help. Giannis, on the other hand, I mean, yes, he had a good roster. Chris Middleton is a very, very, very good complementary piece. I mean, he made the All-Star game. Eric Bledsoe, also a very, very, very good complementary piece. But let's just break down the last couple awards over the last 10 years or so, shall we, John? So a stat that people have really taken into consideration the last however many years is player efficiency rating. Now, the way that that's broken down is you take all their positive accomplishments subtracted by their negative accomplishments, and then there's this big formula, and, it spits out the number. Now, the last however many years, dating back to 2011 so that's 9 seasons, to 2011, 2012, the leader in player efficiency rating has won the MVP in all but one season, and that was a Steph Curry year. I think it was the first Warriors season when they won all those games and they broke the NBA record for most wins. That was the only time in the last 10 years that the guy with the highest PER in the NBA didn't win the MVP. Giannis edged out Harden by the smallest margin, but he still led the league. Now let's go into Giannis's stats for the year. Obviously, Harden hasn't beaten in the offensive points category. We know that Harden's the best scorer in the NBA. He's the best at getting baskets. I mean, at any point, getting to the free throw line. We know he made the most free throws. Giannis was 3rd in points. So even though Harden led, Giannis was right behind him, 3rd in points per game. He was 6th in rebounds. This is a guy ahead of notable names like Hassan Whiteside, notable names like Nikola Jokic, notable names such as Karl Anthony Towns, more rebounds than all of them. He was a guy who contributed 6 assists per game. On top of all that, we're talking about value. He was 2nd in defensive rating amongst everyone in the league. 2nd. In every qualified player in the league, the guy who did all these great accomplishments offensively was also 2nd defensively. And you know what? And I think there is a talk that needs to be had, and the guys on the show had it yesterday, talking about the way the MVP is voted for. And, it is generally voted for the best player on the best team. It kind of is what it's been for the last however many years. 8 of the last 11 MVPs have finished first in the NBA with the best record. It just, the proof is in the pudding. That's dating back to the 2010-11 Derrick Rose Bulls. They finished first. Derrick Rose wins the MVP. We had obviously a crazy season of Russell Westbrook where he breaks records everywhere and wins the MVP, even though they didn't finish first. And Kevin Durant on the Thunder, the year they made the finals, won the MVP, but they finished second in the conference. So, Do I think the award should be included in the postseason? Sure, because there's obviously a guy that we all know that just won the NBA Finals that arguably was the best player in the NBA this year. But because the award is voted the way it's voted, I think Giannis, deservingly so, won this award fair and square.
All right. I mean, I definitely understand your take there. No, nothing to take away from Giannis, great player and all, but in order to win games, you have to score points, and that's exactly what James Harden does. He's one of the best scorers in the entire NBA, and as you said, he is the Rockets' offense. The Rockets go as James Harden goes. Chris Paul injured for a lot of the year, and there's really nothing else behind him. So, point number one, he averaged 36 points a game, led the NBA in scoring. And it's not as if he doesn't contribute in other categories either. 6.5 rebounds, 7.5 assists. The man does fill up the stat sheet. As you mentioned, he set NBA records for consecutive 30-point games this year. He's just absolutely carrying everything you want in a leader, in the guy's best overall player. And we're talking about, the MVP. It's not always has to be the guy that's on the best team. You had the Bucks maybe winning the Eastern Conference with number 1 seed here going into the playoffs. And yeah, the Rockets were the number 4 seed, but still Harden did everything he could to get him in the competitive Western Conference in a really favorable playoff position. Point number 2, he's number 1 in win shares, number 1 in offensive win shares, number 1 in usage rate. Pretty much all of the peripheral stats that we look at, all those advanced sabermetric stats, that we talk about for the NBA. Harden was pretty much number 1 in a lot of those. Number 1 in box score plus minus, offensive box score plus minus, value over replacement player number 1. So how do you go ahead and go against a player that's number 1 in all those categories when they're telling you based off stats there's nobody better than him in terms of replacement player than James Harden? So like I said, you have those things, you have his scoring title. And again, you wonder where they would be without James Harden. For me, I think he deserved to win the MVP this year.
Now, I have a question for you because we both took a side of Harden versus Giannis, but back to what I was saying earlier, do you think that this award needs to be adjusted in terms of bringing the postseason into the award? Because what's more valuable than winning a championship, right? Every year we talk about who's going to win the championship. I mean, we've talked about the Warriors dynasty for so long. We talked about the Heat dynasty. We talked about Cleveland because they were winning championships. Now, I think there should be a different award, maybe a regular season award, maybe the best player in the regular season. But I think the MVP award should be given out at the end of the year. Do you have any thoughts on that?
There is a finals MVP for the teams that make it there. So, obviously that's the best player in the finals. If you wanted to do best player in the playoffs, that's hard to judge because most likely the best player in the playoffs is the team that's going to be in the finals anyways, right? So, if you're going postseason award, I think, the NBA Finals MVP makes sense. And those awards are always regular season award. I mean, if you want to switch sports, everybody's up in arms, or sort of up in arms, really, if you talk about the Alex Rodriguez MVP when he was in Texas. Last place team in baseball, but he had all the gaudy stats and was named the MVP. Teams like, well, did he deserve it? Was he the most valuable player? Maybe not in terms of, getting his team to the playoffs, but where would they have been without him? And that's how I think about it with James Harden. Where would they have truly been without him, the Rockets, in the Western Conference? I know you talk about Giannis and the importance that he had, but they still had Chris Middleton. They still had Eric Bledsoe. They still had solid players on that team that could help them in a weaker, Eastern Conference, in my opinion. If Harden went down, knowing the injury history with Chris Paul as well, that would be a pretty rough go for the Rockets. And so his importance to me is just greater. And that's why I felt like he deserved the MVP. But like I said, we can debate back and forth. Obviously, if you're watching this and you have an opinion, feel free to comment. We'll put out, vote. Tell us who you think had the best idea there. But James, switching gears, there was another vote that happened, another award that was handed out on the NBA award ceremony. Dan, that was Most Improved Player, and that went to Pascal Siakam. He was the guy that you and I were super high on all season long. Big DFS players, you and I, seasonal basketball players, general NBA fans. Siakam really emerged this year. My question for you is more of a predictive one, though. Going into next season, who do you think is the player that's most likely to win that Most Improved award next year?
So we both had a pretty long list of names that we could pick from, but I'm going to go with Our boy, another guy that we were very high on all year. I mean, pretty much the middle stages on because he wasn't getting as much time in the beginning of the year, but that's Jonathan Isaac. And the Magic have a lot of question marks coming into free agency and coming into next year. Obviously, number one is their all-star is rumored to be going elsewhere. And obviously, we don't know the market for him, but he was a perennial all-star for them last year. He was a guy who can get you 20 and 10 on a given night, and he was an improved defensive player as well. So let's take Nikola Vukovic out of the equation. Then they could be losing their sixth man in Terrence Ross, who is also an unrestricted free agent, and he could be going elsewhere if another team decides, you know what, we don't have any perimeter scoring. This is a guy who can get us 25 to 30 points when he's really feeling it on any given night. So right there, that is potentially 35 points per night not there. Their first round pick that they took this year is going to miss half the year. So you don't even have to worry about more forward depth even entering the equation for Isaac because he's hurt. So there's a lot of points to be had. We saw vast improvements from year 1 to year 2. I'm not even going to say the height improvements because he grew 3 inches from rookie year to sophomore year, which is actually mind-blowing considering he was in the NBA and he grew 3 inches. If you think about that, it's crazy. But we saw field goal percentage improvements. He was a 37% shooter in his rookie year, going up to 43 year 2. He's a decent three-point shooter. I think there's potential for growth. He shot 35% in college from 3. He shot pretty good his rookie year, and he took a step back last year, but he had a lot more opportunities. I think those shots will continue to fall. And we saw a very good improvement from the free throw line, 76% to 81%. So, he's a really good shooter. We know he's a lockdown defender. He's tall. He's lanky. I think this has all the makings of a Pascal Siakam. They're similar in build. They're similar in play style. I think Isaac is probably a better shooter, and Siakam is probably better off the bounce. I would say Isaac is more of an intimidating defender, considering he has the largest wingspan in the NBA at 7'1", other than his teammate Mo Bamba. But I think that there is just so much room for improvement, especially when the Magic inevitably lose out on these players because they get outbid by the Celtics of the world, and they get outbid by the teams that have more bright of a future, I'll say. So I'm going to go John Isaac. We wanted to say our other candidates. I think Miles Bridges could be in line for a really, really, really big year out in Charlotte, especially if and when Kemba leaves, because I do think Kemba leaves. He doesn't seem like he really wants to be in Charlotte. Even though he says he loves it there. But I really think Miles Bridges, and I've been on the fence if DeJounte Murray should be improved or come back. I think he could literally win both. So I'm going to throw him in the mix. And Dennis Smith Jr. I think Dennis Smith Jr. the Knicks, because they're not going to get anybody that everyone, even though they were going to get everybody, they're not going to get anybody. I think the Knicks are going to realize, hey, this is probably our best player. We should let him play.
Yeah. Obviously, the Magic also don't have to worry about Markelle Fultz, who's back on indefinite leave of shooting. Not even going to try shooting a basketball at this point, so they don't know when he's going to play. I like the pick, to be honest with you. And again, another guy that you and I were big fans of. But for me, I have somebody different in mind. Again, we're going back and forth, trying to rack my brain who I think could, win this award next year. Guys like Marvin Bagley popped in my head. I think Troy Brown Jr. is a really dark horse over with the Wizards if they do trade Bradley Beal, John Wall with his injury. Who knows? Trevor Ariza gets a year older. How that team's going to develop there. So interesting spots with him. But I ultimately went with my Boston Celtics and with Gordon Hayward. I think he just makes the most sense for me because he is a player that is proven to, be an all-star before, all-star caliber player before when he was with Utah, suffered an absolutely, gruesome injury. That's point number one. The expectation for him last year, I think, was a little bit unfair. Coming back from that injury that he had. Yeah, he had time to recover from the surgery. He had the offseason. But I think it was very unfair for everybody to assume that he was just going to go ahead and be that player that he was right away. And I think that's something that we could see from him this year. Point number 2 is the pending departure of Kyrie Irving. Assuming Kyrie Irving does leave, I think that's going to allow more of the offense to go through Gordon, sort of the way I think, maybe the team wants to envision it. You see when Kyrie Irving was off the floor this year, Gordon played really well. The offense flowed through him. The Celtics offense in general played really well around him. And I think he's a better fit with the guys that they have on the team with Tatum and Brown, in their development, because he can also handle the ball and get them open shots. He's a really good passer. And number 3, you're assuming health, isn't going to be an issue for him this upcoming year. You have to assume he's going to build upon those 2018 numbers. He only averaged 11.5 points per game, but he shot better than his career average from the floor. 46.6% field goal percentage, only averaged 25 minutes a night coming off the bench, sometimes starting. With Kyrie Irving gone, more minutes are going to be there, more shots are going to be there. So I think for me, it shouldn't be too difficult, in my opinion, for Gordon Hayward to go ahead and kind of achieve that most improved player award just simply by the opportunity, assuming that health is gone for him.
I guess the weird gray area that I get in, that I fall into when I think of Gordon Hayward as most improved, is yes, there's obviously room for improvement from last year, but this was before the injury a top 20 player in the NBA. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, he had the Utah Jazz as a home field advantage in the playoffs at one point. I think they were a 4 seed the year after he left. So that is why I think it's weird to think of him as an improved player, because he's already established himself at one time as such an elite talent. And I mean, that's why Boston went out and paid him the max contract to pair him with Kyrie Irving, to say, hey, we have 2 elite players. Unfortunately, the injury took place, and that is an unfortunate part of sports. And he did have a really weird season. I won't even say bad. It was just a weird, all around a weird season, because there were flashes of him being great, especially versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. But
tore them apart.
Yeah, especially against Timberwolves. But that's I agree and I don't, because I'm just having a hard time thinking of at one time the top 3 years ago, the top 20 player in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the award is for the most improved player going across during the regular seasons. And, you have to look at, he did play the majority of the games this year, and he struggled. So there's definitely room for, that type of improvement. Again, there are definitely cases to be made for other guys. I'm just expecting a big spike in production here out of Hayward. Just, again, given sort of the next year removed from that injury. The fact that there could be more opportunities if Kyrie Irving leaves and the Celtics really aren't able to get, that next guy. They're always on the list for players, but rarely did they ever really land those players. They had a trade for Kyrie. I think everybody always assumed Gordon was in the back pocket because of Brad Stevens there, but they were never really able to draw Durant even after they got Horford and things like that. So again, will remains to be seen. The NBA has a lot of young players that could also bounce back in year 2 to kind of scoop up that award. But again, my opinion here, I think Hayward takes it, and you have Jonathan Isaac, who again, really good pick. Let's wrap this up here, though. We'll go to question number 3, and it is about free agents. There are plenty of guys leaving their teams here. Notable names. Kevin Durant declined his option. We know Kyrie Irving likely declining the option there. Kawhi Leonard, did he decline it yet? If he hasn't, he intends to. He intends to decline his option. A lot of players leaving. And I'll start this one off, James, in terms of which player leaving will impact their team the most. And I'm actually not going with any of the players that I just mentioned. I'm going to go with Jimmy Butler leaving the 76ers. If you look at when Butler joined the 76ers last season, he was among their top 5 scorers, obviously points per game, tied for second with 18.2 points. Obviously, Joel Embiid, 27.5 points per game, was number 1. He was tied with Tobias Harris, who played fewer games with them because he was a later acquisition. Next was J.J. Redick at 18.1, and then Ben Simmons at 16.9. Of the guys that I just listed, 3 of them are unrestricted free agents. It's Butler, Harris, and Redick. Assuming they lose all 3, that's going to leave them with Justin Embiid and Simmons. So point number 1, if they go down, the reason why losing Jimmy Butler could be impactful is if we've seen what Embiid and Simmons can do as a tandem in the East. And when Embiid goes down and gets injured, it's really just left to Simmons, who can't shoot. Having Jimmy Butler on that roster will provide, a safety net to Embiid injuries or the nights where he needs nights off to get rest. He can control the ball. He can be that scorer that they need him to be. Point number 2, he was their second leading scorer in the playoffs. He averaged 19.4 points per game in the playoffs, just a couple points below Embiid, who was injured. And that percentages came with him shooting 45% from the floor and just 26% from three. So he wasn't even really a great shooter in the playoffs, yet his ability to score the basketball is what the driving force was in, the 76ers doing what they did. Yes, they ultimately ended up losing, on that in the playoffs here. But again, Butler's importance to that team is key, because if they don't have it, we've seen what the 76ers are, like I said, with just Embiid and Simmons. And I'll bring my third point. They lost to a Celtics team 2 years ago that didn't have Gordon Hayward, that didn't have Kyrie Irving. They had a rookie in Jason Tatum, that a second-year player in Jaylen Brown. That team lost to the Celtics because they don't have any shooters outside of that. That team was decimated outside of Simmons and outside of Embiid, so they really need that big three. And then you look at the landscape of the league, the fact that the Celtics could be without Kyrie, that the Bucks are going to possibly lose Chris Middleton, that Kawhi could leave. The East is open for the Sixers that create a big three if they can get Jimmy Butler to come back. And they can even enter the season this upcoming year as maybe the favorites if they're able to secure Jimmy Butler and go into the year with Simmons, Butler, and Embiid. So in my opinion, I think Jimmy Butler possibly leaving Philadelphia has the biggest impact on their team, because I think they're rather mediocre without them. If you want to go ahead and take a look at the players that they have on contract, next year, without the with just Butler and everybody leaving, it's pretty slim. It's like Embiid, Simmons, and a couple draft picks that they had from last year. Zaire Smith, it's pretty sparse. So getting a big three there will be huge for the 76ers if they're able to bring back Butler.
That's interesting, because I don't think Butler's going back, and I do think that's going to be a big loss for them. If he does leave, they have to somehow salvage Tobias Harris. They have to. Their
roster is Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Zaire Smith, and Jonah Bolden right now on their contract. So
they can play in the Big Three. They can play in the Big Three league. They cannot currently play in the NBA.
Right.
I like that. But again, if you lose Butler, you have to sign Tobias, or you just go out and you steal Middleton from the Bucks, or you do something of that nature. I'm going to take the chalk and draw all over the chalkboard, and I'm going to write Kawhi's board man gets paid. That's what I'm going to put on my most important player. I mean, come on. I mean, point number 1. We saw the Raptors for seemingly a million years with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry do nothing. Get the 2 seed, get the 1 seed, get the 3 seed, home court advantage against LeBron. Sure, LeBron was gone from the East this year and Kawhi didn't have to run into it. But is it a coincidence that DeMar leaves, Kawhi inserts into his spot, and they win the championship? I don't know. And now the roster construction without Kawhi is also very, very okay. And the Eastern Conference isn't great, as you mentioned, and it could be really a lot worse if guys like Kyrie leave and go out west to LA, or even if he goes to Brooklyn. Like, what's the real improvement there? I mean, the Celtics are going to be a young team. The Wizards, we know, are done. The Magic might lose Vukovic. I mean, there's so much opportunity for Kawhi to return to this roster. They just got Marc Gasol back today. And this is a guy that 2 years ago, before the Boogie Cousins Achilles injury, we were talking about as arguably the best center in the NBA, a guy who's won a Defensive Player of the Year. But you can't do it with Marc Gasol, Kyle Lowry, and
the most improved player.
And Pascal. I mean, yes, Pascal Siakam is a very good asset, but is he going to assume the role of Kawhi Leonard, who in the playoffs was? I mean, Siakam had games, but there were also games where you didn't see Pascal Siakam. There's a reason why Kawhi won the MVP. Second, you can go over to look at other places like the Warriors, where they're losing Kevin Durant. I don't think that matters as much as Kawhi Leonard, because I think Klay Thompson means more to the Warriors than Kevin Durant does. They won a championship without Kevin Durant. Yes. Do I think Kevin Durant means a whole lot? Do I think Kevin Durant's their best player? Yes. But I still think Klay Thompson is the glue. There's a reason why they are the Splash Brothers. So, I mean, you break it down in other situations, and I don't think any other big significant loss is as big as Kawhi Leonard. And it's just, you win an NBA championship with the guy. First off, I don't know why he wouldn't want to go back. We just talked about how many holes there are in the Eastern Conference. Why even risk going out to the West, to LA, to the Clippers, or someone of that nature, or keeping your eye on the Lakers? Like, I guess that would be the only other reasonable place to go, because you're going to win a championship in LA, but you're also got just a great opportunity to win in Toronto again, because of how bad the East is and how banged up the Warriors are. So I think it's a no-brainer. I'm taking Boardman gets paid, or gets whatever the freaking saying is. And I think Jimmy Butler's nice, and I think Kevin Durant, could be in the Klay Thompson, but I don't think it's close.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, there are other guys that I almost considered going with Redick there as well, leaving. You look at it, his production there, he's had 2 of his highest scoring career years. And what's the one thing that the Sixers don't have is shooters.
Yep,
so losing a guy like Redick, I felt would have been very impactful. But ultimately, I think I landed on Butler. I just feel like his star caliber, like we still consider him, a top 15-ish player in the NBA. And we talked about, as you said, the depth in the East, that they're able to bring him back. They have the money. They don't have anybody really on their roster. That they could really solidify that. But I like your points there. I think this is a good conversation to have. You guys watching, what do you think? Who's the most free agent leaving their team that's going to have the most impact? Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. James, that wraps it up, though. I think we'll call this a draw. I think you and I both brought some good points to the table. Producer Matt Sells, maybe he'll have something to say about that as well. But any final thoughts here, James?
I think that if you could do it in reverse, I think you would have said Kyrie Irving would have the best impact if he left Boston.
I would. I want absolutely nothing to do with Kyrie Irving on the Boston Celtics.
So you could have went with that. You could have said impactful in the best possible way would be Kyrie Irving leaving the Celtics.
I cannot wait till he opts out, and I never have to have him on my team again.
Well, I hope he comes to Chicago. How about that?
There you go. All right. I'm John Pembo again. You can find me on Twitter at jmpembo777. James Grande, you can get him on Twitter at @the_real_Grande. Matt Sal's producing. Thank you very much. Talk to y'all later.